Hello and welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you could join us today for our webinar, Stay Ahead in 2025, Master AP's Biggest Challenges Before They Hit. I'm Haley, and I'm part of the marketing team here at MHC, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Our speaker today is Mark Brousseau, who I'll introduce shortly. But first, I'd like to quickly go over some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and attendees will receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording on our website if you'd like to revisit the content. All participants have been muted to prevent background noise, so if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section, and we'll get to them at the end. There will also be a post-webinar survey that will appear when the webinar ends. Please use the survey to let us know how we're doing and to request any additional information so that an MHC resource can follow up with you. We really appreciate your feedback on these webinars. So our speaker for today is Mark Brousseau, president of Brousseau and Associates. Over the past 30 years, he has established himself as a thought leader in the world of accounts payable, accounts receivable, and document automation. Mark is a popular speaker at industry conferences and on webinars and podcasts, and he advises both end users and service providers on how to use automation to improve document-driven business processes. So with that, let's hear from Mark about 2025 AP trends and how to prepare accordingly.
Thank you so much, Haley, and thank you all for joining us today. Don't you wish you had a crystal ball? So we knew exactly what time our flight would be leaving, what we should wear tomorrow, how much the Eagles are going to win Sunday's game by. But the fact is that's not reality in most opportunities. This is especially true when it comes to accounts payable. Years ago, the knock on accounts payable was that it was slow to change. That has all changed, pardon the pun, in a big way since the start of the pandemic. In fact, today, accounts payable is moving at a dizzying pace. We have new ways of working, new technologies, new risks. Keeping track of it all can be overwhelming. Now, the point of today's webinar is to provide you with a roadmap, that crystal ball, if you will, to help you identify the four key trends that we believe you need to be mindful of in 2025 to ensure that your department is set up for success next year and beyond. That's what we're going to discuss today. We'll start with a quick discussion about the changing role of accounts payable, a level set, if you will. We'll go through four key trends that we believe you need to prepare for in 2025. We'll provide you with an action plan for rolling up your sleeves and putting your department, your career, and your business in the best possible position for success. And as Haley said, we're going to leave time for your questions. Don't hesitate to send them in throughout the webinar. We'll answer them all at the end of today's comments. And that brings us to our first poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. We want to know, which of the following is your accounts payable department's biggest challenge? Which of the following is your accounts payable department's biggest challenge? Is it high costs and low staff productivity? Do you have too many errors, too many exceptions, too many incorrect payments to suppliers? Is it taking you too long to process invoices and to pay your suppliers? Perhaps you have lots of missed payment deadlines. Are you getting too many emails and phone calls from suppliers and maybe from internal stakeholders as well about where things stand in the process? Or is it something else that's keeping you up at night? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. It's interesting because since 2020 and the pandemic, the issues that AP leaders have been facing have changed considerably. Used to be that when you talk to an AP leader about their biggest challenge, it invariably came back to my costs are too high and the boss is pressuring me to do something about it. But now that we've adopted remote and hybrid work environments, now that we've changed the way that things get done in accounts payable, well, now we're hearing more and more issues with slow cycle times, lots of inquiries from suppliers, and lots of concerns about fraud. And against that backdrop, well, yeah, we still have tremendous pressure to do more with less. So, Haley, let's take a look at how it is folks responded to our poll question. We asked you all, which of the following is your AP department's biggest challenge? And Haley, if you wouldn't mind letting us know the results, that would be great.
Yes, so it looks like the highest answer was slow cycle times, which is 38%. And then something else is 25%, and then the rest looks like evenly split.
Evenly split. 38% of you say you're struggling with slow cycle times. Not surprised to hear that. In fact, everything in accounts payable is taking longer these days, including the financial close. The fact is while we might have adapted to our new remote work environment, the fact is many of us haven't optimized that process, and so maybe we're relying on emails to push invoices around our organization, and that gives us a high chance of things being misrouted or lost or inadvertently deleted or just ignored or forgotten about. Um, and so we're hearing more and more AP leaders say that things are taking longer these days. Um, I'm curious about those of you who said something else. We're not going to let you off the hook that easy. What we want you to do is to use the chat tool on your screen to tell us, what is that something else? What is it that's keeping you up at night? Go ahead, type that in, and maybe we'll provide you with some advice later on in today's webinar. Well, whether your challenge is high costs and low productivity, slow cycle times, too many errors, or too many supplier inquiries, the fact is these are the types of things that accounts payable leaders are facing these days. The role of accounts payable is changing. There's a lot more resting on your shoulders these days. And while you already thought that you couldn't possibly take on any more responsibilities, um, today's accounts payable leader has even more responsibilities. It starts, of course, with operational efficiency. Now, organizations are looking for ways to wring inefficiencies out of back office processes. And there's no back office process that is more labor intensive, cost intensive, and paper intensive than accounts payable. Additionally, we find that supplier relationships are a bigger responsibility for accounts payable leaders these days. During the pandemic, we talked a lot about supply chain disruption, and while it's not as big a issue for businesses these days, the reality is that it was a wake up call for us to realize that our interactions with suppliers are critical to how our businesses function. And in many cases, AP is on the front lines of ensuring that those supplier relationships remain strong. If we pay suppliers late or incorrectly, well, it's less likely that our supply chain is going to continue humming along. We also are counting on accounts payable to play a bigger role in ensuring budget integrity these days. It used to be that the budget was something that somebody else handled. AP departments, though, are playing a bigger role. Organizations realize that if they could unlock that data that flows through AP departments about what it is your organization is buying and who it's buying it from and in what quantities and at what price, well, that could give them better visibility into corporate spending. And that can help us ensure that we're staying in line with our budgets. AP also is having a seat when it comes to financial decision making. Today, organizations are looking for AP to be more of an information hub. Don't tell us what happened. Tell us what will happen. What is going on with our cash flows? What's going on with our corporate spending? How are we doing with our operational performance? And if we can get at the data that resides on invoices, well, AP can help us with that decision making. And finally, AP is critical to an organization's trust with its investors, its board members, even its trading partners. The fact is that having a good controls over your disbursements and visibility into your corporate spending and into your cash flows can provide us with tremendous trust with our stakeholders. The problem is that AP is facing some significant challenges. In terms of the antiquated and outdated approach it takes to processing invoices and paying suppliers. Many organizations still rely on manual processes for invoice processing and supplier payments. Only 9% of all AP departments today are what they call fully automated. That means where invoices flow into the organization and are processed touch free and posted directly to an ERP without anybody having to touch them. 9%. And today, when you consider that about 5% of organizations are completely manual, paper based, that means that most of us are somewhere in between. What we've got is an environment where we've deployed some technology, but we still do a lot of manual intervention. And that isn't good enough these days. Imagine this. Today, 77% of all AP departments have deployed some sort of automated technology. 77%. The problem is that 66% of AP departments still manually handle most of the invoices they receive from suppliers. Now, you say, wait a second. On one hand, you're telling me that a lot of departments have automated. On the other hand, you're telling me that they're still manually handling most of these invoices. How could that possibly be? Well, the problem is the way that we've gone about automating these processes. We've taken this piecemeal hodgepodge approach and we haven't looked at our AP processes end to end, and that's created some big challenges. AP departments are also facing higher risk of fraud these days. Today, the FBI, states attorneys general, Interpol, a who's who of people you never want knocking at your front door are sounding the alarm. They're saying that the way that AP departments do things these days has increased the risk of payment fraud. And this makes perfect sense because when we were forced out of our offices during the pandemic and we tried to quickly adapt our processes, most of us didn't think about the implications to those hardened policies and procedures we had in place to how it is that things ought to get approved. And so now we're doing things like relying on emails to onboard suppliers and collect supplier banking details. And so we've got lots of sensitive financial data that's put in jeopardy. We also are seeing AP departments are facing not enough visibility into their data. I just told you that it's important organizations get at data. Well, most of you are flying blind when it comes to AP information. Key information isn't captured. Captured information isn't correct. It's not complete. Information isn't timely. It's not well organized. And your systems are largely fragmented. And so that means that we have lots of manual handoffs. We have lots of manual keying. We have information latency. We have data silos. At the end of the day, that means that senior managers, folks like CFOs, can't access the information they need about their AP to make informed decisions. And finally, AP is under tremendous pressure to do more with less. More on that in just a moment. If these are the types of pressures your organization's facing, well, take solace. You're not alone. The question is how do we manage these challenges and prepare our organization for what lies ahead? And that's what we're going to discuss during today's webinar. We're going to lay out four essential things you need to know about AP for 2025. The first trend for 2025 that your department needs to be prepared for is that the risk of payment fraud is still going to be high. I'm old enough to remember when we used to say, well, if we only got rid of these paper checks, then our payment fraud would go away. Well, paper check volumes have declined, and yet today, payment fraud is at an all time high. In fact, check fraud is increasing according to a recent study by the FTC. Well, what's going on here? Well, two things are going on here. Number one, paper checks still remain the riskiest way to pay your suppliers. It turns out that bad guys and bad girls, why does it always have to be a bad guy? Bad girls as well, can get those keys to open blue mailboxes that are on the corner of every major city on the dark web. In fact, in some cities, there's been a spate of cases where fraudsters have been able to assault mail carriers to steal their keys and intercept those paper checks once they're in the mail. This really speaks to the fact that once a paper check is dropped in a mail tote, you really have little control over it. And there's not a whole lot of science that goes into whitewashing those checks and depositing them into an account that a fraudster controls. In fact, today, because of remote deposit capture and mobile deposit and ATMs, a fraudster doesn't even have to go into a bank branch to deposit these checks into their account. And while paper check still remains very high, the fact is we're also facing high risk of electronic payment fraud as well. And whereas that paper check fraud is really brute force, right? You're just stealing paper and depositing into an account. This new line of fraud that targets electronic payments is sophisticated. In fact, you're up against high tech conmen, in some cases, who are backed by rogue nations who are using advanced technologies to rip businesses like yours off. In fact, one fraud scheme that was recently broken up had 500 employees. It had an HR department to recruit fraudsters, and it even had a marketing department to market their ill gotten data. Today's fraud schemes are increasingly sophisticated, and the old ways that we went about trying to secure our processes just aren't up to the task. So the fact is that if you haven't updated your processes and your systems, you're probably leaving yourself vulnerable. And things are only going to get worse in 2025 and beyond. Today, we're facing several vulnerabilities in AP departments. First and foremost among them are manual invoice to pay processes. Just think about the way that your department probably goes about collecting information from suppliers or approving invoices. You have little control over the data that resides on those documents. In some cases, if you're using manual environment, it's laying out on someone's desk. And so it's easy to be able to intercept those documents. It's easy to be able to have prying eyes get at that data. There's no segregation of duties in these manual environments. There's no systematic workflows. There's no audit logging of who did what. And of course, there's no data encryption. So if you're paying a supplier with a paper check and you're probably printing out the original invoice and shoving it back in that envelope, think of all the data resides in that envelope that could fall into the wrong hands. We make things worse with the way that we go about verifying changes to bank account details from suppliers. So hopefully you've made the switch from paper checks to electronic payments. And to do so, you're going to have to collect banking details from your supplier. And over time, those banking details are invariably going to have to change. Well, how does your organization go about verifying the authenticity of that bank account change request? In the past, you probably just fired off an email and sent it to the supplier to say, hey, is this you? But the problem is today, because of phishing schemes and business email compromise attacks, now it's easy for fraudsters to impersonate trusted suppliers and maybe even some of your coworkers, like a CFO, and put themselves in the process and try to redirect payments to an account they control. So, if you're using those antiquated approaches to verifying bank account details, they're probably leaving your organization vulnerable. This is really easy to be able to impersonate someone. Last year, I spoke at a conference. And after the conference, one of the AP managers in the audience came up to me and she said, hey, Mark, I got to thank you. Last year, you talked about these phony bank account change requests. And I got to thinking about it on the airplane home. And when I got home, she went to the most tech savvy person she knew to try and gauge just how big a problem this was for her. That tech savvy person was her 14-year-old son. At dinner one night, she said to her son, hey, this guy told us about this ability to create phony bank account change requests. Do you think you could create one to fool your mom? Well, if you have teenage boys, there's nothing they like more than getting one over on their parents. So, as she tells the story, he ran upstairs, and before she could finish washing the dishes, about 20 minutes, he came down with a piece of paper in hand. All she had told him was the name of a supplier that her company has done business with. And that's all he needed. On that piece of paper, he saw the logo. She saw the logo of that supplier's company right at the top. Well, that's easy to find online. But then she saw this beautifully written professional letter requesting the bank account details for this company be changed. Well, where did you get this type of letter? She said to him. She said, well, there's samples out on the web. And then she noticed in the letter had the name of her supplier's actual bank. She remembered this is the bank they do business with. Well, where'd you find this? She said to him. Well, the bank listed that company out on the web as one of their clients. And then the kicker at the very bottom of the email, the letter was the name of the person she actually does business with in the AR department at that supplier. Well, where did you find this? She said to him. Well, you're connected to him on LinkedIn, he said. This is when she realized she had a problem. And this is what we're up against. Now it's not just letters coming in via email. Now it might be texts or even phone calls that impersonate the voice of, say, a CFO in your organization or maybe even your supplier. Once someone has been hacked, it's easy for fraudsters to insert themselves into the process. And the turnover we're having in AP is complicating matters. Many of us relied on seasoned employees to just intuitively know when something didn't look right in the past, right? They would see an invoice say, "No, come on now. This supplier doesn't send us an invoice for this amount, or this supplier doesn't send us 5 invoices in a month." But now that we've had turnover in AP and some of our most seasoned staff have left or retired, they're not there to catch these things, and the new people might not know them. So, what can you do about all this? Well, the first thing is to beef up your employee training. Most AP departments take what I call a set it and forget it approach to training employees when it comes to mitigating fraud risk. You know the drill. We sit down a new employee, we tell them the do's and don'ts, we pat them on the back, and we send them on their way. The problem is fraud schemes are constantly evolving, constantly changing. And now that we're not in the office all the time, we don't have the ability to share with one another the schemes that we've uncovered. Back in the day, right, we'd stand around the water cooler or the coffee pot. We'd say, hey, you're not going to believe what someone tried to pull. And everybody'd listen to the story and they'd file it away. But now that we're remote, at least part of the time, well, we don't always have those opportunities. So we've got to create them. We've got to find ways to constantly train our staff on what they should be on the lookout for and to have mechanisms for sharing the schemes that we uncover. You also want to make sure you automate, and automating the collection and validation of supplier bank details is critical to this. You want to make sure that you have tools for verifying the ownership of bank account details. So, making sure that the account is open. What's the name on the account? Where is it located? Why would my supplier who's in Texas have a bank account in some far off country? Was the routing number and account number legit? And is there money in the account? Um, you also want to make sure that all of this is done in real time. One of the things that is key when it comes to fraud is the longer it takes for us to be able to uncover schemes, is the greater the opportunity for fraudsters to get away with losses. But one of the most powerful things you can do to mitigate your risk of fraud, and something I'd encourage you to do in 2025, is to automate your invoice to pay process. Invoice to pay solutions like MHC have built in controls that help mitigate your organization's risk of fraud. Things like user access permissions make sure that only certain people can access certain modules in the system. Automated segregation duties. So the same person who approves an invoice might not be able to initiate a payment. Systematic workflows. So there's never any chance for somebody to cut a corner and to take the easy way out and potentially leave you vulnerable to fraud. Complete audit logging. So you can see at a moment's notice all the actions taken on an invoice or a payment. And finally, real time reconciliation. And while reconciliation won't stop fraud. What it will do is help you uncover it faster so you can mitigate your losses. These steps, along with training and good policies and controls, can help you ensure that you mitigate your risk of fraud. And that brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, how would you describe your AP department's current level of automation? How would you describe your AP department's current level of automation? Would you say you're fully automated with no manual tasks? Would you say you're largely automated with few manual tasks? Would you say you're partially automated? You've deployed some technology, but you still have lots of manual tasks? Or is your organization manual, paper based? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. So you might be wondering, well, if so many departments are somewhere in between, not fully automated and not manual or paper based, what are they planning to do about it? Well, 71% of all AP departments, 71% plan to automate further in 2025. And what's really interesting is that 44% of AP departments that describe themselves as being largely automated, they've deployed technology, but they still have a few manual tasks. 44% of those departments plan to deploy more technology. And the lesson there is organizations recognize that they can't just be semi-automated. They've got to find ways to move as close to possible to full automation to gain the improvements in efficiency, visibility, and security that we're talking about today. All right, Haley. So, how did our attendees respond to this poll question?
Looks like the majority said largely automated, few manual tasks, so 63%, and then the other 38% said partially automated.
Awesome. So, no matter where you are on the automation scale, your goal should be to continue striving to becoming fully automated. And the good news is that today's invoice to pay platforms make it easier than ever to be able to automate end to end from invoice receipt all the way through reconciliation and reporting. And that's good because one of the key pressures for 2025 is going to be pressure to do more with less. It's no question that back office efficiency is critical at any time. But when the economy is uncertain, when we have big geopolitical events in the world, when we have a new administration, when we have some turbulence in the economy, well, you better believe that back office efficiency is critical, and the challenging labor market is going to increase the need for this efficiency. It's going to really put more pressure on AP to find ways to do more with less. We can't count on that labor being there for us when we need it at a rate that we can afford. What you need to do as well is find ways to improve efficiency so you can free up your AP staff to focus on more value added tasks. Today, 84% of the typical accounts payable practitioner's day is wasted on manual tasks like keying data, shuffling paper and emails, fixing errors and mistakes, responding to supplier inquiries, and chasing down information. 84%. That leaves only 16% for strategic activities. But if you walk down the hall and you ask your CFO what they want your team focused on, well, they'd say it's the exact opposite. And so we've got to find ways to eliminate these inefficiencies in accounts payable if we ever hope to achieve our strategic standing in the organization. And that starts with doing something about the manual processes, errors and mistakes, and approval delays that so many of us face, even those of us that have partially or largely automated our operations. So the first thing you want to do in 2025 is automate your invoice to pay process. The type of platform that allows you to digitize and simplify the receipt, capture, validation, routing, and posting and reporting of our invoices, and then to find ways to pay suppliers without paper checks. You also want to find ways to integrate supplier portals into your invoice to pay process. We spend 14% of our time in AP on average just chasing down invoices that have been submitted by suppliers. And we spend more time in responding to supplier inquiries and emails. In fact, a time study recently done by IOFM, the Institute of Finance and Management, found on average it costs $360 to respond to a single supplier inquiry. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you multiply that times each of the supplier inquiries you receive in a month, well, now that is a lot of money. And finally, you want to find ways to integrate reporting and analytics into your AP process so you can see at a moment's notice where things stand in the process, but also be able to access and unlock that invoice data. One other key efficiency in AP is to increase your electronic payments to suppliers. There's no question that more and more organizations are moving from paper checks to electronic payments. There's good reason for that. Whether you're paying a supplier with ACH or virtual card, electronic payments are just faster, they're more secure, and they provide better transparency. And oh, by the way, suppliers prefer electronic payments, but you might be encountering some obstacles in driving electronic payment adoption. Maybe it's mom and pop suppliers. Maybe it's some skeptical strategic suppliers who are on the fence. What you want to do is you want to make sure you have a plan for overcoming these barriers. You want to make sure that you sell suppliers on the benefits of electronic payments. Put it in terms that they understand. Leverage a third party to be able to help sell them on the benefits to them, and also emphasize the working capital improvements from electronic payments. You also want to make sure that you have a solution that can easily integrate with their workflows, so you can provide them with the rich remittance data that they need to be able to streamline their accounts receivable processes. And finally, you want to make sure that you discuss the security of electronic payments. There's a number of ways to do all this. The first is to offer a solution that's integrated with your invoice to pay process so that you can have an end-to-end solution with complete control and visibility. You also want to make sure you educate suppliers on the adoption of the benefits of the adoption of electronic payments. Whenever possible, leverage a third party's enrollment services. There's no need for your AP staff to be making those phone calls to sell suppliers on the benefits of electronic payments. And finally, you want to make sure you have a solution that provides you with security at every step of the way. The third thing that we think you need to know about in 2025 is the need to enhance visibility. Today, senior management wants us to have visibility, control, and security over our AP data. And our outdated systems, well, they're just not up to the task. The fact is most of us rely on this hodgepodge of point solutions and closed loop networks that just don't have the centralization and standardization that we need to ensure we have the visibility that we're going to need. And so, what we end up with is this environment where we have redundant processes, so called turnaround accounting, where you set your staff up with two keyboards so they can open a document on one and key into another. We have lots of downloading of spreadsheets and, of course, uploading of files to our ERP as well. And then we have multiple workflows that we literally need to juggle. And that, in many cases, creates latency and silos and delays. Today, only 5% of all businesses say that their ERP is fully integrated with their banking systems. What that means is that in many cases when it comes time to pay our suppliers, well, now we have some manual processes. So we have to find ways to improve visibility and control. And that's where AP automation comes in. Invoice to pay solutions provide us with built in tools that give us smart insights at our fingertips. Graphical dashboards show us in a moment's notice where we stand with our metrics and our key performance indicators. It shows us the status of invoices. Drill down capabilities help us uncover the source of issues and helps us identify trends that we should prepare for. Mobile access allows purchasers to be able to stay in the know while they're on the go and also approve invoices. Exports allow us to get information to downstream systems and processes without manual intervention. And ad hoc reporting that's built into some invoice to pay solutions ensures that the solution will be able to adapt to our ever changing business needs. With these capabilities, you'll be able to get the visibility that your organization needs. And importantly, you'll be able to provide valuable dashboards for every user in your organization. CFOs will be able to instantly see where they stand with corporate spending and cash flows. They'll be able to better gauge their organization's days payable outstanding, that measure of how long it takes your organization to pay its suppliers on average. CFOs will also be able to track AP performance. So you'll be able to crow about the efficiencies you've gotten from your invoice to pay automation. Line of business managers will be able to see exactly where things stand with purchase requests. They'll be able to better control their budgets and be able to more accurately forecast their spending. And they'll be able to uncover trends using invoice data that your department has processed. And for your part as an AP leader, well, now you're going to be able to instantly see spend by category or supplier. You'll know at any moment's notice about accrual reporting. You'll be able to get KPIs on your payments to suppliers so you can identify those opportunities for optimizing your payments and maybe be able to identify those suppliers that you might have some leverage with during contract renegotiations. And finally, you'll also be able to use dashboards to be able to better track the efficiency of your processes. These dashboards provide value to everyone across the organization. And with widgets built into invoice to pay solutions, you can ensure those dashboards are customized to their needs without them having to root through information. And the fourth trend for 2025 is that the adoption of artificial intelligence powered solutions are going to rise. I can't think of another technology that both excites and terrifies AP leaders as much as AI. And I think it all goes back to that hit movie from the early 80s, the Terminator movies. You remember that one, where this Skynet network became self aware and wanted to eradicate the human race. Well, many of us saw those movies and we think of AI as this malevolent technology that doesn't want to eradicate the human race, but eradicate our jobs. The reality is much different, though. AI is truly a co pilot for us in our jobs. It can become a personal assistant. So while it won't eradicate our jobs, it will eradicate the things we don't like about our jobs. Things like having to manually key data or determine who a approver is or manually generating reports in spreadsheets. Artificial intelligence can transform the invoice to pay process end to end. It does more than that, though. It allows our technology to pour through our historical databases to be able to help detect anomalous transactions that might indicate fraud. It can also go through those historical data to be able to identify trends. Oh, this time of year, you typically have higher spend. We might want to be prepared for that. And we can also use AI to help us manage our operational demands so that we're able to scale our operation more efficiently without the need to hire additional staff. Because once we've freed up our team from the manual, repetitive tasks like keying data or shuffling paper, now they can focus more time on strategic activities. And really, AI is critical for overcoming a lot of the types of challenges we face. Think about manual data entry. Well, things like AI powered solutions can reduce human error. It improves efficiency and it allows you to reduce your costs in ways that OCR on its own could never do. Predictive invoice routing and AI assisted exceptions resolution can accelerate our workflows. So, those of you who are struggling with cycle times, AI might be the answer. AI also allows us to be able to better manage our cash flows. So, it can help us understand historical trends and identify where we might need to make changes in the future. It also gives us better visibility into our processes so we can make better decisions, and it improves our supplier management by allowing us to onboard suppliers more quickly and manage changes to supplier information more efficiently. Now, this isn't to say that AI is some sort of panacea, right? Just like any other technology, there's some key considerations when you're considering implementing an AI powered AP solution. And the first, understand your needs. Well, there's some folks out there who say, well, AI can do everything. Well, that might be true, but the reality is you need it to do what your challenges are. So the first thing I want you to do is to assess your needs. Understand where you are with your current processes. Identify those technology gaps and pain points. And that'll help you identify opportunities for applying AI powered AP solutions in a strategic way. Next, I want you to think about the change management. Your staff is probably already nervous about AI. The key thing is to get ahead of those discussions. It's tempting to think, well, I don't want to tell my staff we're considering AI because that'll make them nervous and they might want to leave. I actually recommend the opposite approach. You want to be upfront with them so that you can get them as part of the evaluation process. And then you want to make them excited about the technology. Show them how it will free them up from things like data entry to things that they want to do, like data analysis. And so, what you want to do is communicate the benefits to your staff. You want to make them part of the evaluation process. You want to make them part of the testing and deployment process. You want to constantly solicit their feedback on how the solution's working so you can then make adjustments accordingly. And you want to make sure that you use tools within AI powered AP solutions to track progress so you can empirically identify those areas that need some more focus. And finally, I want you to make sure you keep in mind that AI is only as good as the data that's fed into it. So if you have that filthy vendor master database, if you're using a lousy data capture solution today, these are the types of things that you're going to need to fix. AI needs to get information from multiple sources, and that's the power of AI. So you want to make sure that you're providing it with clean data so you can ensure the integrity of the system. You want to find ways to leverage AI in 2025. It's a powerful technology, particularly in AP. My recommendation would be to start small. Identify a gap in your current process or maybe a particular set of suppliers and use the technology to address those issues. Next, have a plan for upskilling your staff. So recognize that there's going to be changes for them, and it might be hard for a lot of them. Have a plan in advance for how it is you're going to bring them along. If they're used to a 10 key operator kind of environment, well, AI might be a shock to their system. You want to work with your HR department and your technology provider to make sure you have tools for them to be able to train them on the system. AI powered solutions are largely intuitive, but you want to make sure you have a plan for getting everybody trained. And finally, you want to make sure you focus on data integrity. As I said, poor quality data will impact the results that you get from an AI powered AP automation solution. Constantly track the quality of data going through that AI solution and the output from it. You want to identify any issues and see if there's a need to retrain the system or to clean up your data further. And that brings us to our third poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. We want to know, does your AP department currently use an automated solution for processing invoices? Does your AP department currently use an automated solution for processing on invoices? Yes? No, but you're planning to deploy one? Or no, and you have no plans to deploy one? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. So hopefully automation is on the roadmap for 2025 for your department, but let's see how everyone responded. Haley, what are the results of our poll question?
71% said yes, 14% said no, but planning to, and 14% said no and no plans so far.
I think if you're looking to deal with the challenges that we're going to face in 2025 and beyond, I think automation is going to be critical for your department, unless, of course, you're already fully automated. So the question is how do we do it? Well, I want you to look for an end-to-end solution, one that brings together all of the capabilities from invoice receipt to invoice data capture, workflow routing for those invoices that don't match a PO or might not have a PO associated with them, seamless posting to your ERP or accounting software package, whatever that might be, and then a partner or built in capabilities for supplier payments. What I want you to do is look for a solution with the features and the functionality that you need for those pain points you'll identify during your needs assessment. I want you to make sure you look carefully at the total cost of ownership of prospective solutions so you can uncover any hidden costs so that that doesn't undermine your return on investment. Make sure you're dealing with a technology provider that has a proven track record and reputation for AP automation, and maybe even one in your industry. Make sure the vendor has layered services. So it's not just about technology, it's about making sure that you can make the most of that technology. For goodness sake, make sure any solution you look at has the ironclad security. And make sure that a vendor has a product roadmap to deal with these constantly evolving technologies. The message we want to leave you with today is this: AP is evolving at a dizzying pace, and staying ahead of these trends, well, it can help you protect against fraud and ensure operational efficiency and even put your organization in a better position for financial success. If you proactively adopt automation, analytics, and AI, well, that's going to put your organization in the best possible position to elevate your department, your career, and even your organization in 2025 and beyond. And with that, Haley, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Mark, for that great session. And yes, we did have a couple of questions come in. So I'll read those off. And looks like the first one is around AI and automation. So this person says, I'm interested in AI and automation, but my boss may have reservations. I'm wondering if you have any tips around upper leadership buy-in within an organization.
Great question and not an uncommon one. I hear often that AP automation proposals sort of get stuck on the boss's desk. One of the biggest mistakes we make as AP leaders is we don't put the proposal in terms that the boss cares about, right? We spell out what it's going to do for the department and kind of forget what it is that's keeping our CFO or controller up at night. What's keeping a CFO up at night is this: they want to find ways to improve cash flow analysis, liquidity management, and risk mitigation. The good news is AP automation does all of that. Make sure you weave in proof points throughout your proposal about how it is the solution will help the organization improve cash flow analysis, that visibility we talked about, liquidity management. Here again, visibility and payment and electronic payments, and then of course risk mitigation, those built-in controls. If you do that, that's going to resonate better with the CFO and probably get your proposal through to approval.
That's awesome. Thank you. And it looks like our second question is similar. I think you touched on some of this, but you might have more to add. So when rolling out a significant change like automation, what are some best practices for staff adoption and change management?
Right. First, recognize that change is hard and that your staff might be terrified about the idea of making changes to the way they've done things and what it might mean to their jobs. You want to acknowledge this. You want to be upfront with staff. You want to get them excited about it. Recognizing that even if you do the best hype job ever, they still might be skeptical about what it means to them in the long term. You also want to empower them. So you want to make sure that you just don't throw the technology at them. You want to put them in a position of success. You do that, that'll make the change easier on your staff and it'll help drive adoption, which at the end of the day will help drive ROI on your AP automation solution.
Perfect. Thank you. And that looks like that was our last question. So, yes, thank you everybody so much. That wraps up today's webinar. We thank you all for attending, participating. You'll be receiving an email with the link to the recorded webinar if you'd like to revisit the content. And once again, please don't forget to fill out the post-webinar survey so we can continue to improve and provide more valuable webinars. So have a great day, everybody, and happy holidays.
Thank you, everyone.